The night Elliot left for his supposed conference in Chicago, I found the first piece of evidence that would unravel everything. It was a text notification that flashed across his iPad, the one he'd forgotten on the kitchen counter in his rush to catch his flight. A message from someone named Vivian. Flight landed. Keys under the mat as promised. See you soon. For a moment, I stood frozen, my fingers hovering over the screen. Elliot didn't know anyone named Vivian. At least, he'd never mentioned her to me in our 8 years of marriage. And why would this woman have keys to anywhere Elliot was going? The conference hotel wouldn't leave keys under a mat. I set the iPad down, my heart pounding as I tried to rationalize what I'd just read. This could be nothing. A message meant for someone else, a colleague, an innocent explanation. But the cold weight settling in my stomach suggested otherwise. I glanced at the clock. 7:48 p.m. Elliot's flight would be landing in Chicago in 20 minutes. I had a choice to make: confront him immediately or dig deeper. I chose to dig. Our story began like many others: two people meeting at a charity fundraiser, a conversation that flowed effortlessly, phone numbers exchanged with genuine smiles. Elliot Chen was charismatic, ambitious, and seemed refreshingly honest. When he told me he was divorced after a brief marriage in his 20s, he didn't flinch or try to hide the pain. I rushed into something I wasn't ready for, he'd said. But it taught me what matters. I was 31 when we met, established in my career as an architectural project manager, and tired of dating men who either felt threatened by my success or wanted to use it to their advantage. Elliot, with his own thriving career in financial consulting, seemed different. He asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. He remembered details about the buildings I'd helped design, the challenges I'd overcome. 6 months after we met, he proposed on the rooftop of a building I'd worked on. A year later, we were married and living in a renovated brownstone in Boston's South End. The first 5 years were good, not perfect, but good. We built a life together, hosting dinner parties, taking trips to places we'd both always wanted to see, supporting each other through career setbacks and achievements. We tried for children for 2 years, endured 1 miscarriage, and eventually agreed to revisit the conversation after we both hit certain career milestones. The subtle shifts began 3 years ago. Elliot started traveling more for work. Quarterly trips became monthly, then bi-weekly. His financial consulting firm was expanding, taking on international clients. Success meant sacrifice, he explained. I understood. My own career demanded similar commitments, but the distance grew in small, almost imperceptible ways. Conversations over dinner became updates on schedules rather than exchanges of ideas. Physical intimacy became routine, then rare. We still functioned well as partners in the practical sense, managing our home, our finances, our social obligations. But the connection that had once felt so natural now required effort. I told myself this was normal, the inevitable evolution of a long-term relationship. We were no longer in the honeymoon phase. We were building something sustainable, or so I thought. The night before Elliot left for Chicago, we'd had a rare moment of connection. He'd come home with takeout from my favorite Vietnamese restaurant and a bottle of the Pinot Noir we'd discovered on our trip to Oregon's Willamette Valley. We sat at our kitchen island, shoes off, sleeves rolled up, and talked about a potential renovation to our back patio. I'm thinking we could use that Brazilian hardwood, he said, sketching on a napkin. The one you showed me in that magazine. Ipy, I said, surprised he'd remembered. It's beautiful, but expensive. We can afford it, he replied, refilling my wine glass. And you deserve to have the space exactly how you want it. He smiled at me then, the same smile that had drawn me to him all those years ago. For a moment, I felt the familiar warmth of being truly seen. The conference is only 3 days, he said later as we got ready for bed. I'll be back Friday night. Maybe we can continue this conversation over the weekend? Maybe even meet with a contractor? I agreed, feeling cautiously optimistic about this small reconnection. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye, his suitcase rolling behind him. Love you, he said. Don't work too hard while I'm gone. Back at you, I replied, watching from the doorway as he got into the Uber. If I'd known what was coming, I might have said something different. Something more. Or perhaps nothing at all. After finding the text on Elliot's iPad, I poured myself a glass of the leftover Pinot Noir and sat at our kitchen island, considering my options. I could call him, but what would I say? Who's Vivian? Seemed both accusatory and inadequate. I opened his iPad again. We'd always known each other's passcodes, not out of suspicion but out of practicality. In 8 years, I'd never felt the need to search through his devices. Tonight was different. The text from Vivian was there on the screen, but when I opened his Messages app, there was no conversation with anyone by that name. The message had been deleted. I checked his email next, searching for Vivian. Nothing. I opened his calendar, looking at the details for the Chicago conference. It appeared legitimate. The American Finance Association's quarterly meeting, scheduled for Wednesday through Friday at the Hyatt Regency. Elliot was listed as a panelist for a Thursday morning discussion on emerging markets, risk assessment in unstable economies. I closed the iPad and pulled out my laptop, searching for the conference. It existed. The panel existed. Elliot's name was listed on the conference website. Everything looked normal. Except for Vivian and her keys under the mat. I finished my wine, feeling foolish. One unexplained text wasn't enough to upend my trust in our marriage. I decided to let it go for now, to ask him casually about it when he called before bed, as he usually did when traveling. But Elliot didn't call that night. I texted him around 11. Made it okay? Hotel good? A response came 20 minutes later. All good. Exhausted from travel. We'll call tomorrow. Sleep well. I did not sleep well. The next morning, I went to work, trying to focus on the hospital renovation project my team was managing. But my mind kept returning to that text, to Elliot's brief response, to the growing knot of unease in my stomach. During lunch, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into our shared credit card account and checked recent transactions. Elliot had indeed purchased a round-trip ticket to Chicago through his company's travel portal. But there was also an Uber receipt from O'Hare Airport to an address in Lake Forest, a northern suburb, not to the downtown Hyatt where the conference was being held. I copied the Lake Forest address and searched for it online. It was a private residence, a large lakefront property valued at just over $3.8 million. The property tax records listed the owner as V. Northcott V. Northcott. Vivian? My hands shook as I closed the browser and stepped outside for air. This was no longer just an unexplained text. This was deliberate deception. When I returned to my desk, I had a text from Elliot. Panel went well. Networking dinner tonight. Might be back late to the hotel. Don't wait up if you wanted to call. I stared at his message, wondering how easily the lies seemed to flow. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on, glad it went well. Enjoy dinner. That evening, instead of going home, I drove to the office of Carlisle and Burke, Elliot's firm. I'd only been there a handful of times for holiday parties and the occasional lunch date. The receptionist recognized me. Mara! What a nice surprise. Elliot's out of town, though. I know. I smiled. I was meeting a client nearby and realized I left my charger in his office last week. He said I could stop by and pick it up. She didn't question it, just waved me through the security gate with a visitor's badge. You remember the way to his office? I nodded, walking confidently toward the elevators, my heart pounding against my ribs. Elliot's office was on the 12th floor, a corner space with views of the harbor. His assistant's desk was empty. It was after 6, and most of the administrative staff had gone home. A few financial analysts were still hunched over their computers in the open workspace. But no one looked up as I walked past. I used the key Elliot had given me for emergencies to unlock his office door. Inside, everything was meticulously organized as always. Elliot's desk held a computer, a family photo from our trip to Japan last year, and a neat stack of folders. I sat in his chair, unsure what I was even looking for. I opened his desk drawers first. Nothing unusual. Just office supplies, a protein bar, a spare tie. The credenza behind his desk held reference books and client files. I scanned them quickly, seeing nothing with V. Northcott or Vivian. I was about to leave when I noticed a thin gap between the credenza and the wall. Something had fallen behind the furniture. I reached down and retrieved a black moleskin notebook. Inside, the first several pages contained meeting notes and client information. Normal work documentation. But in the back, there were entries in a different format. Dates, times, and initials. VN. The entries went back 18 months. Each one included a location. Lake Forest, New York, London, Singapore. The entries aligned with Elliot's business trips. My throat tightened as I flipped through the pages. This wasn't evidence of a single indiscretion, but of a sustained deception. A parallel life. The most recent entry read, May 14, 17, Chicago, Dow LF. VN today was May 15th. I took photos of the relevant pages with my phone, then carefully replaced the notebook exactly where I'd found it. I left the office, smiling at the receptionist on my way out. Amazement that I could maintain such composure when everything inside me was crumbling. In my car, I sat motionless, trying to process what I'd discovered. My husband was lying about more than just who he was meeting in Chicago. This had been going on for over a year and a half. Planned, documented, hidden. I had one more place to look. Our home office contained a small fireproof safe where we kept important documents, passports, birth certificates, our marriage license, property deeds. Both of us knew the combination. Inside, I found what I expected: the documents, some emergency cash, my grandmother's pearl earrings. But there was also a manila envelope I didn't recognize. The envelope contained a deed to a property in Lake Forest, Illinois. The purchase had been made through an LLC called North Star Ventures. The mailing address for the LLC was a P.O. box I didn't recognize. I searched for North Star Ventures online and found it was registered in Delaware 2 years ago. The listed managers were E. Chen and V. Northcott. My husband had purchased property with another woman and hidden it behind an LLC. As I sat surrounded by evidence of Elliot's deception, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Miss you. Can't wait to be home Friday. I set the phone down without responding, unable to play along any longer. The question wasn't whether Elliot was betraying me, but how deep the betrayal went and what I was going to do about it. I didn't confront Elliot by phone or text. I wanted to see his face when he lied to me again, wanted to watch his expression when I revealed what I knew. I spent the next day methodically gathering more information. I contacted a lawyer friend who specialized in corporate law and asked hypothetical questions about LLCs and hidden assets in divorce proceedings. I made copies of all our financial statements and secured them in a safe deposit box at a different bank from the one we used jointly. I also called my sister, Lauren, who lived an hour away in Providence. I need you to come over tomorrow night, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I need you to not ask questions right now. Lauren, who had always been protective of me, agreed immediately. I'll be there by 7. On Friday, I took the day off work. I cleaned our house meticulously, as if preparing for guests. In a way, I was preparing for the arrival of the truth, which had been an unwelcome stranger in our marriage for far too long. When my doorbell rang at 6:45 p.m., I was sitting calmly at the kitchen island. Dressed in the blue dress Elliot had always said brought out my eyes, my hair loose around my shoulders. Lauren took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. What's happened? I told her everything. The text, the Lake Forest address, the notebook, the LLC. That son of a bitch, she whispered when I finished. What are you going to do? I'm going to hear what he has to say, I replied. And then I'm going to decide if our marriage is worth saving. And if it's not, then I'll need a place to stay for a while. Lauren squeezed my hand. My guest room is yours for as long as you need it. At 7:30, we heard the sound of an Uber pulling up outside. Lauren retreated to the guest bedroom upstairs, out of sight, but within earshot if I needed her. I remained seated at the kitchen island, My hands folded in front of me as Elliot's key turned in the lock. "Mara?" he called, the sound of his suitcase rolling across the hardwood floor. "I'm home." He appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking travel-worn but smiling. He was wearing the gray suit I'd helped him pick out last year, his tie loosened, his dark hair slightly mussed. For a moment, looking at the man I'd loved for 8 years, I almost lost my resolve. Part of me wanted to run to him, to pretend I knew nothing, to preserve the life we'd built. Instead, I said, "How was Chicago?" "Busy," he replied, setting his briefcase down and moving toward me for a kiss. I turned my face slightly so his lips caught my cheek. If he noticed, he didn't show it. The panel went well, but these networking events are exhausting. "Did you stay at the Hyatt the whole time?" I asked, my voice neutral. He was pouring himself a glass of water, his back to me. "Yeah, of course. Why?" The lie slipped out so easily. In that moment, something hardened inside me. "That's interesting," I said, "because according to our credit card statement, you took an Uber from O'Hare to Lake Forest, not to downtown Chicago." Elliot turned slowly, the glass of water in his hand. A slight tightening around his eyes was the only indication that he'd heard me. "I had a meeting with a potential client who lives up there," he said smoothly. "I went there first, then downtown to the hotel." "A client named Vivian Northcott?" I asked, watching his face carefully. The color drained from his cheeks. He set the water glass down with a controlled movement. "You went through my things," he said, his voice low. "You lied to me," I countered. "For 18 months at least. Probably longer." Elliot ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it just seemed like a calculated pause, giving him time to formulate another lie. "It's not what you think," he finally said. "Then what is it, Elliot?" "Because I think you've been living a double life. I think you and this Vivian person own property together. Through an LLC, I think you've been seeing her on your business trips for at least a year and a half." His eyes widened slightly at the mention of the LLC. He hadn't expected me to discover that much. "Mara, please, let me explain." "I'm listening," I said, though a part of me wondered if anything he said could possibly matter now. Elliot sat down across from me, his hands flat on the countertop. "Vivian is my ex-wife. This was not what I'd expected." "Your ex-wife," I repeated. "The marriage that lasted less than a year when you were 25? He nodded. "We were young. It didn't work out. But we've reconnected." "Reconnected," I echoed, the word bitter in my mouth. "And when exactly did this reconnection occur?" "About 2 years ago," he admitted. "She reached out because she was going through a difficult time. Her father was dying, and she needed someone who understood her family dynamics. And you decided to be that someone, despite being married to me." Elliot had the decency to look ashamed. "It started as friendship, Mara, I swear. I was just helping her through a tough time." "And then you decided to buy property together? That seems like quite a leap from friendly support." He flinched. "The Lake Forest house was her father's. After he died, she was going to lose it to estate taxes. The LLC was a way to help her keep it." "With your money," I said flatly. "Our money." "My inheritance from my grandmother?" he corrected. "It wasn't our joint funds?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Is that supposed to make it better? That you only spent your inheritance on your ex-wife instead of our shared money? While lying to me about where you were and who you were with?" Elliot reached for my hand. I pulled away. "Mara, please. It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it for me," I demanded. "Are you sleeping with her?" His hesitation was answer enough. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "A year," he admitted. "But it's not. If you say it's not what I think one more time, I swear to God, Elliot." He fell silent, his hands dropping to his lap. "Do you love her?" The question hurt to ask, but I needed to know. Elliot looked at me, his eyes filled with what seemed like genuine pain. "I don't know," he said finally. "It's different with Vivian. We have history, unfinished business." "And what about our history?" I asked. "Our business? Did you ever intend to finish that properly? Or were you just going to keep lying until—" What? Until you decided which one of us you wanted to be with? I never wanted to hurt you, he said. You have to believe that. Yet here we are, I replied, gesturing to the space between us. With you living 2 lives and me finding out from a text message you forgot to delete. Silence stretched between us, thick with 8 years of shared history and 18 months of deception. Finally, Elliot spoke again, his voice quiet. What happens now? It was the first honest question he'd asked all night. Now, I said, standing up, you're going to pack a bag and leave. You can stay at a hotel or with a friend or with Vivian in Lake Forest. I don't care, but you're not staying here. Mara, I'm not done, I continued. On Monday, I'm meeting with a lawyer. I've already copied all our financial records, including your little LLC arrangement. I suggest you be completely transparent from this point forward, or things will get much more complicated for you. Elliot stared at me, perhaps seeing for the first time that the woman he'd married wasn't going to crumble in the face of his betrayal. I never meant for this to happen, he said, rising from his seat. And yet you made choice after choice that led exactly here, I replied. Pack your things, Elliot. You have 30 minutes. As he climbed the stairs to our bedroom, Lauren emerged from the guest room, her expression a mix of sorrow and pride. You okay? She whispered. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I would ever be okay again. I will be, I said, which felt more honest. 30 minutes later, Elliot stood at our front door, a suitcase in hand. He looked both diminished and relieved, as if the weight of his deception had been both burden and armor. Can we talk again? When things are calmer? He asked. My lawyer will call yours, I replied, holding the door open for him to leave. As I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to come. Not for what I'd lost. That grief would arrive later. But for what I'd found. The strength to face the truth. No matter how painful. 3 months after Elliot left our home, I sat across from him and our respective lawyers in a mediator's office, finalizing the terms of our divorce. The intervening months had been a blur of legal consultations, financial disclosures, and emotional reckonings. I'd moved in with Lauren temporarily, then found a small apartment of my own. I'd told my close friends and colleagues an abbreviated version of what happened, navigating their sympathy and outrage with as much grace as I could muster. Elliot, to his credit, hadn't contested anything. He'd admitted to the affair, to the hidden LLC, to the 18 months of deliberate deception. He'd agreed to my terms. I would keep our Boston home and my retirement accounts. He would keep his business interests and the Lake Forest property. We would split our other investments equally. As our lawyers reviewed the final documents, Elliot looked at me across the table. He'd lost weight, and there were new lines around his eyes. I'm sorry, he said quietly, when the lawyers stepped out to make copies. I know, I replied, because I did know. His remorse seemed genuine, if belated. But it doesn't change what happened. No, he agreed. It doesn't. He hesitated, then added, Vivian and I aren't together anymore. I raised an eyebrow. That didn't last long. It was never going to, he said, looking down at his hands. What we had was nostalgia, not love. I think I always knew that. Then why risk everything? I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. Why throw away 8 years of marriage for something you knew wouldn't last? Elliot was quiet for a long moment. Because I was scared, he finally said. Of growing older. Of the life we'd settled into. Of the fact that you didn't seem to need me the way you once did. So instead of talking to me about it, you created a fantasy with someone else. He nodded, shame evident in his posture. It was easier than facing the truth. Which was what? I pressed. That I was the one who'd changed, he said. Not you, not our marriage, me. And I didn't know how to change back or even if I wanted to. It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. But it came too late to save what we'd lost. Our lawyers returned, and we signed the documents that legally ended our marriage. As we stood to leave, Elliot reached for my hand. I hope someday you can forgive me, he said. I looked at the man I'd once built my life around, feeling a complex mix of anger, sadness, and an unexpected sense of liberation. "I'm not doing this for you," I said, gently withdrawing my hand. "I'm forgiving you for me, so I can move forward without carrying this weight." Outside the mediator's office, the summer sun was bright, the air humid with August heat. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing deeply, aware of a lightness in my chest that felt both unfamiliar and welcome. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. "All done? Want company tonight?" I smiled, typing back, "All done. Think I need some solo time, though. Brunch tomorrow?" Her response was immediate. "Absolutely. Proud of you, sis." As I walked to my car, I passed a small gallery with a sign in the window announcing an architectural exhibition. On impulse, I went inside. The gallery was cool and quiet, the walls lined with drawings and models of innovative buildings. I wandered through the space, admiring the creativity, the vision, the possibility inherent in each design. Near the back of the gallery, I found myself standing before a model of a house built into a hillside, its structure both grounded and reaching outward, as if in conversation with the landscape around it. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice beside me. I turned to see a woman about my age, with short gray hair and intelligent eyes. "Yes," I agreed. "There's something so honest about it," she smiled. "That's exactly what I was going for. I'm Isabel Reyes, the architect." "Mara Chen," I said, shaking her extended hand. "I'm an architectural project manager. Are you? Which firm?" We fell into easy conversation about our work, our influences, our approaches to design challenges. When the gallery began to close, Isabel suggested continuing our discussion over dinner at a nearby restaurant. Sitting across from her at a small table, I found myself talking not just about architecture, but about my recent divorce, my uncertain future, my tentative hopes. "Sounds like you're designing a new life," Isabel observed. "That's its own kind of architecture." I considered this, turning the idea over in my mind like a smooth stone. "I suppose it is," I said. "Foundation first, then structure, then all the elements that make it uniquely mine." "And what does that design look like?" she asked. "If you could build anything for yourself now, what would it be?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was intrusive, but because no one, including me, had asked it in a very long time. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I think it involves more openness, more light, room to grow in unexpected directions." Isabel raised her glass in a toast. "To new designs," she said, "and the courage to build them." Later that night in my apartment, I sat by the window overlooking the city lights. I thought about Elliot, about Vivian, about the life I'd thought was solid that had proven to be built on shifting sand. I thought about the evidence I'd found: a text message, a credit card receipt, a hidden notebook, small things that had revealed a larger truth I'd needed to face. But mostly, I thought about the question Isabel had asked: what did I want to build now? For the first time in months, the future didn't loom like a void to be feared, but opened like a canvas waiting for the first bold stroke. The evidence of Elliot's betrayal had changed everything, not just by ending what had been, but by clearing space for what could be. I took out a sketch pad and began to draw. Not a building, but a life. My life. The one I was now free to design according to my own blueprint, governed by no one's vision but my own. Outside, the night sky stretched vast and star-filled above the city, reminding me that endings are also beginnings, that loss creates space for discovery, and that the most important evidence I'd found wasn't about Elliot's deception, but about my own resilience. I had survived the collapse of the life I'd built with him. Now it was time to build something new, something stronger, truer, and entirely my own.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.